Our guest tonight is Jeff Harman. We are so honored to have him here. Jeff, again, thank you so much for giving us some time on this holiday weekend.
Well, yeah, it's my honor as well. Trust me.
So before the break, or before the news break, we were talking about a few things. We were talking about some, of course, how you use astrology. But let's talk a little bit about the spiritual side of things. Let's take it a different direction.
Well, that still connects to astrology, and that's what I love about, you were saying before, am I doing a lot of audio forensics work? Almost none. It's fascinating. I say to Camille all the time, I'm just surprised at how many clients I keep getting, and I'm really blessed in that way. And when I'm the happiest is when I can hang up the phone with a client and get them to see the energies in their lives in a different way. And that's where I think astrology, in the ancient sense, really is spiritual, where it empowers to know that the astrology is not you, but that it's energy hitting you. Take for instance, positive thinking. That is an area, I'm actually working on a book about this right now, where most of us have heard about the law of attraction, the law of allowing. Of course, this is Abraham Hicks. Many other people, Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar, of course, Earl Nightingale, and so many others, and Tony Robbins, who really is Napoleon Hill on steroids. Bottom line is, all this stuff most people will take, and they'll walk away, and they'll get something from it. They all shake their heads and they agree. But somewhere down the line, we're a little left to center, but we're never where the positive thinking should bring us. Now, I agree with positive thinking, and I absolutely think the law of attraction is right on. But I would propose the law of resonance, because we got to admit somewhere in here that there are forces acting upon us that are outside of our conscious perceptual awareness. And now, the minute you do that, you now open up the possibility where you're not negating law of attraction. You're actually saying, okay, what am I attracting I don't know I'm attracting? And see, this opens up a huge area. When you could say it could be anything from, some say entity, some say karma. But what I love to talk about is something called elementals. Now that word evokes, that's some kind of a thing from, Riddick or something, the Chronicles of Riddick, if you've seen that movie. But it's really, Dr. Emoto, who wrote the book Messages in Water, has really proven what the ancients have said all along. Most of your saints and prophets and avatars have said similar things, and that all causation is mental. We've heard that before. And that any good psychologist will tell you belief systems, when commensurate with results, brings happiness. If your belief systems are inconsistent with the results you're getting in your life, you might do something like the crazy guy did last night. And we hear about people doing stuff like this all the time at different levels. Maybe not that bizarre, but and we have to look at, in my opinion, the collective unconscious, what we have, that baggage we're carrying there. And I was mentioning Saturn before. I believe Saturn is the karmic gunny sack that we all carry around. Now, people listening, they'll go, well, how could the planet Saturn out there in the solar system be carrying everybody's stuff? Well, what's interesting is I think, if you want the real matrix, we all have a duplicate kind of resonance in the physical body that's known on the tree of life, that human beings incarnate with the structure on the tree of life that's very analogous to the Sephiroths, or you could say the planetary resonances. I always say, forget Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus. The real matrix may be this one. And if we get familiar with that, the positive thinking is true, but then we can see forces maybe that are on us. And I love that some of the ancient methods actually are very much where I think the religious foundations of many different religions were founded upon, where you can look at how to diffuse that karma, or, as a psychologist, is a change of belief, but more at a core level, also collectively known as maybe the subconscious level. So it's interesting stuff that it offers in that viewpoint. And I'm not out to promote astrology. I was actually trying to get away from it a number of years ago, and it just keeps chasing me.
Well, it just all kind of interconnects, and it all just kind of fits in.
It sure does. There's, the old saying, the reality for every individual is their perception. And if you take work like Dr. Edith Fiore, she wrote The Unquiet Dead. Dr. Carl Wickland is a really compelling document. It's a book called 30 Years Among the Dead. It was written in the early part of last century. I think it came out somewhere in the 50s or 60s. Mm-hmm. He was actually the head of the Los Angeles Mental Institution. I think he was the one that popularized or invented shock therapy treatment. And he ended up, and he was Mr. Science, Mr. Left Brain Linear Science, and ended up marrying a channel. It's total opposite of who he was.
Right.
And he documented for 30 years all these cases where no one really, as we call death, exits the body. It really dies, and the consciousness lives on. There's so many examples of that. And I think the ancient astrology shows that even the stuff we have collectively in a much maybe more contained way is still showing up in these lifetimes.
Do you think, Jeff, that when, just to get your opinion on it, do you think that when a person leaves the human body, when they pass, do you think that they realize it right away? Do you think that, we've read so many different books and so many different things. Do you believe that they know where they're at? They know. I mean, it was kind of the universal plan. Do you think it all becomes clear?
Well, I don't really know. I would say my belief is that it depends on the individual consciousness. It all comes down to individual self-awareness or self-consciousness. Because if you take the clinical side, like Dr. Fiore, there's another one I really like a lot, Dr. Edith, it was Dr. Louise Ireland Fry. She wrote Freeing the Captives and many, many other books. Dr. Baldwin is another one. He was actually a dentist who wrote the Spiritual Manual and had many people in that about these issues. The evidence is if we could become self-aware, I think we'd know we were dead, or as humans call it, dead. One of my most favorite mystics that I always quote is a man that was known as Dascalos on the island of Cyprus. He, one of the probably better books written on him was a book called The Magus of Strobolos. This man was a healer, and he explains it elegantly, where we have the physical body and the present personality, what a psychologist would call the lower conscious mind. And then you have the collective soul at the very top, but beneath that you have the spirit. And then you have, very similar to the tree of life, this collective karmic elemental body, if you will. He calls it a psychic body. Some folks call it a noetical body. And then there's the etheric double, which is known as the astral body. It's kind of heady stuff, but once you get it, it's really makes sense. And again, the whole thing is conscious self-awareness. So there's so many stories of people, like for instance, astral travel. Anyone can do astral travel. If you practice, you can literally create what they call an etheric double elemental and pour your consciousness into it. And it sounds, some people question it, but it absolutely is capable of anyone. And you can literally astral travel out of the body. And I believe that's what happens when we die, as humans call it, or say, exit the body.
It would take, to me, well, again, you'd have to be very open-minded and a lot of practice to do that.
Yeah, it does take a lot of practice to do that. And I think anybody can. If we were shown, I would recommend anybody who's interested in his particular methods, there's a book called Esoteric Teachings and Esoteric Practices on Daskalos' website. It's at stoaseries.com. Wonderful stuff. I mean, it's wonderful stuff. If people want to see how to become empowered, that's the kind of stuff that's wonderful. You know, if we stay being programmed by the physical 5-sense, three-dimensional world, we're never going to break out of it.
Well, we're so comfortable with it.
Yeah, well, it becomes our reality structure. Right. We become literally decent in a lot of ways by the material world, and I think the modern world is wonderful as it is with all the technology and cars and hot water. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for the ancient world, but right. In a way, it's de-souling us. It's knocking our consciousness down.
No, I would agree.
Some people.
I would totally agree with you. A question from you from our friend Red on the other side of the pond this morning. It says, does Jeff have any Native American ancestry or similar spiritually driven genes in the family tree?
Boy, that's a good question. Not to my knowledge. I know I have a lot of European energy. Though I'm resonant with, again, genetics is an interesting, topic, but not that I know of, but I respect and revere many different disciplines. I personally think the physical body is a vehicle, and we're not that. We're in here attached to it. One of my favorite books is a book called the Sefer Haggadah. It's a Hebrew book that's called the Book of Legends, and it talks about some very interesting things. How at conception, the silver cord is attached to the soul or to the body, to the embryo. But then it's the birth chart comes later, and we, obviously, getting a conception chart is not an easy thing to do. Most people don't know when they were conceived.
Right.
And but when my son was born, I've always heard that the soul was tied into the body by the angel at the first breath. And it was interesting. We actually did conceive my child with astrology. In fact, I've helped a lot of women to conceive using astrology. It's based on the woman's birth chart. I've had a couple who've actually had their doctors work with them in vitro, and we've had good success. The interesting thing is we conceived my child at a good astrological time based on my wife's birth chart, and then she had to induce. She said, Jeff, he's not coming. It's 9 months, and the doctor says I have to induce. So I got really blessed to be able to pick the day that she would go in for C-section. And it was in Kaiser over in West Los Angeles, and I'll never forget, I was holding her hand, and they had the tent up, that they put up when they do the C-section. And I'm holding her hand. She was shaking from the epidural, and I really was worried about her because she was really having some convulsions. And all of a sudden, they took the child out. I saw two, I couldn't see any wings or shapes, but just like two spheres, and boom, right when they joined, he cried. And they cut the umbilical cord, and my mouth just dropped. I just, oh my God. And I felt like an angel had just blessed me. And I'll never forget it. I walked up to this little baby laying there. He reached up and grabbed my hands and looked me right in the eye, and I just melted. And I have to be honest, I've melted ever since. I just love that child. And, of course, he's now going on 13. And It was the most, and when the angels stand me up at the end and say, what was the best part, I'm going to say that right there.
That was it. Even when he throws your tools in the garage all over the floor.
Even still, I just love that kid. I really do. Well, and the interesting thing is, I look at compatibility for a lot of people. I do this for CEOs and companies. I do it for relationships. In Vedic astrology, you can see what they call yoga aspects between people. And it's amazingly accurate. I mean, forget sun sign astrology. This stuff it's mind-blowing how accurate it is. And it's helped me working with people. Like, I'll see certain clients that we have a Moon-Mars aspect, and I know I'm either going to irritate them or they're going to irritate me, and I'm much more mindful to be courteous. And not that you shouldn't be anyhow, but it's like zebras are zebras and tigers are tigers. And my boy and I, oh, my God, it's amazing. That's why I'm with my wife. I actually met her at a gas station in Malibu.
Really?
And, yeah, it was about 11:30 at night. I used to run the canyons out there on my motorcycle to round off the tires. So I had a road bike. And I pull into this, at the time it was a Union 76. Now I think it's an Exxon. But right there on the PCH at the bottom of Malibu Canyon Drive. And we're down from Malibu Canyon Drive. Anyways, I pulled in, and she had a bumper sticker that said, I love England. And I said, I don't know what possessed me to do this. Because I wasn't hitting on her or anything. I just looked up, and something made me say, what part of England? And she looked back at me. She says, well, Wiltshire. She goes, I love the crops. I said, oh, my God. I said, do you know Jim Delatoso? Yes. And then we knew all these people in the UFO and crop circle research area. And she was really surprised. So she handed me her card, and I reached in and said, well, here's mine. And I didn't think anything of it. And about a month later, she called and said, hey, remember me? I said, yeah, I remember you at the gas station. So we met. And at the time, I was purposely not going out with anybody. I just wanted to be alone because I had just broken up out of a relationship. And actually, another astrologer and I were testing compatibility astrology with Vedic astrology to see if we could compensate for incompatibility with people we went out with. And the answer was not easy. And anyways, when I was at the cafe, I punched in her birth chart, and I said, oh, my God. I said, you and I, Mercury's in the same sign. We had really good Moon-Venus aspects and on and on. And I just said, wow, okay, then we're really compatible. That was very unusual. And we have been. We've been very, very good. It
all lined up for the stars all aligned, as they say.
Well, the energies were, yeah, exactly right.
You know, you were... oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
You were mentioning about your son. Do you believe when we're born, we're humans, do you believe that we have selected this life? Do you believe that what's now your son, that spirit that's your son, that he selected that was his destiny or predetermined by him in some way, shape, or form?
Well, yeah. I don't know that I can come up with a snappy answer to that one. I'll tell you what my current belief is, and it's supported by some of the ancient stuff, particularly in the Rig Veda and the Upanishads, and it's also, believe it or not, supported in some of the ancient Western stuff, and that is they call them angels of destiny. It's believed that our guardian angel comes from the order of the thrones, which is a very high order of angels. On the tree of life, there's first God, and then there's the seraphims, the cherubims, and the thrones. And we hear this in the scripture where the seraphims surround God, right? And the cherubims as well. And the thrones, it is believed that that is a very high order of angels that accompanies the souls through the incarnations. And they work, and I'm not claiming I know all the answers here, but the collective kind of deduction I've come up with is, particularly in the Vedantic, there's something called the angels, called the lords of destiny, which don't force you to do stuff, but they do select the particular genetics, lineage, people and all that we go through, and it's commensurate with our karmic free will consciousness. That's what they state. It's kind of paraphrasing and summarizing. And what's interesting is, especially in Vedic astrology, I've seen people where they just got blissful karma. Like I'll see people, every person I've ever seen with an exalted Jupiter, they're just good souls. And you look at the yogas in this, and I mean, it is so amazingly accurate. I mean, you can see childhood. When Gandhi was in India with the Salt Wars, you remember that, and the British had found in these ancient southern Indian temples something called nadi. They noticed the nadi palm leaves, but there's also a secret tradition about nadi astrology, and they can actually see the color of the door of the house you grew up on. And you look at this and you go, well, how can this be? You know, and it's really accurate. It shows past life stuff, typically karmic, what they call control planets. I don't claim to know it all. I was very blessed to learn some of it from a man who's now deceased. He actually did financial astrology in London, and pretty knowledgeable guy. And long story short, I pursued as much as I can from various sources and still am. But it's really compelling that yes, we appear to have some very interesting paths, like, for instance, the people we're born to, the parents, the interactions and the siblings and the grandparents. It really fits quite well with he visits the sins upon the sons and daughter to the multiple or fourth generation, and now got translated into. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. It's quite all divine, is what it points to. It's very synchronistic.
Well, and I think you need to do like you do. You take a look at a little bit of everything, you know. I mean, you kind of look at all the different angles, and you read all the different books and all the different philosophies, you know.
Yeah.
And they all, in some way, shape, or form, like I said, once you get past the day-to-day life stuff, it's amazing what you find. One of our listeners sent in a question and said, "What are your thoughts on Edgar Cayce?"
Oh, I think he was pretty profound. You know, no question. And I think there's so much research in, parapsychology that really needs to be, taken a lot closer look at. A friend of mine, Dr. Claude Swanson, he wrote a book called The Life Force Scientific Basis, and he also wrote another book called The Synchronized Universe. Amazing, the parallels he's found in there with hard science and paranormal phenomena. You should have Claude on as a guest. He's a wonderful man. He's worked with the government and DARPA. He's got quite a long history, and he's a very good friend of mine. And I really like putting one foot in the linear left brain science world and then looking at who we are. Do you know that right now the military is playing around? Well, they're not playing around. They're developing it, without question. The DNA microprocessors. In fact, the DNA that's in all of us is not just transmitting, but it's also receiving. And there is some really compelling data right now where the planets are not just, forget gravity. This is all frequencies and harmonics that are interacting with each of us through our DNA. In fact, if you ever study the Magus of Strubles, you'll see that the highest vibration in the universe is thought form elementals. And if you study a person's aura, which anybody can do, you can actually learn to defocus the physical eyes, and you can actually see an aura. You will actually see the thought form elementals kerbumping out of the third eye chakra. We are all thought form elemental generation machines. Louis Mayer and MGM coined it right. What you are, speak so loudly, I can't hear a word that you're saying. And I love that phrase.
I do,
because
yeah.
It's true. The auric field, the physiognomy, the facial expressions, the energy that's around everyone. We feel this in places, in buildings, in offices, in houses. cars. We feel this energy, even in neighborhoods. The ancients talked about this as angels, or another compelling book is Daimonic Reality, which is a really good book, which looks at the plausible basis of thought form, or you could say energies that we emit and that are emitted and linger on this physical plane. And what's interesting is the military's taken a great interest in this because they've hit the wall with microprocessors. So they're now actually using carbon-based, like life form, carbon-based DNA, because it transcends the speed of light. And that's what we all have within us.
Wow. Deep stuff, Jeff.
Well, we're all divine. And what really irritates me the most is that there's a force operating on this planet that wants to keep us stupid. And it does. We're always, be rational. Really? Well, there's nothing wrong with being rational and responsible. But on the other hand, anything that's out, like your radio show, outside of the fringe of the perception of reality is poo-pooed.
Yeah. Well, again, it's all about being open-minded, and looking beyond things, and sometimes it takes major events in your life to look beyond these things and look beyond the. Sorry, my calendar is going off. Look beyond look beyond some of these things, and look and look at things that kind of look at things a little bit differently and take out the day-to-day stuff. Exactly. And be open-minded and accepting of things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I really believe our consciousness absolutely transcends this transmigration or life. There's no question about it. The movie Ghost with Patrick Swayze was a wonderful example. Even though it was dramatized a little bit in Hollywood, but I love that movie because the script writing was elegant in it. And it was right on. And I really believe we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And the ancient astrology absolutely shows it. It proves we're not the astrology, we're experiencing it. And when we become self-consciously aware to that, we change how we play it. Like location astrology I mentioned earlier is amazing. And even to the non-believers who say, oh, well, how can that be? And we'll look at, you can actually take your birth chart and it extrapolates it across the globe. And it's pretty complex. You have latitude crossings that are your own personal ley lines that never move. And it is amazingly accurate. Anyone who has an IQ above room temperature will say, oh my God, that's what it was like when I lived there. Or you also have transits and progressions, so things are constantly shifting as an overlay of where you live. And I've seen it just too many years, and myself I've experienced it. And it's amazing. You can really shift your energy. I had a psychiatrist who came in here a while back, and he said, I just moved to this particular location. It was fairly close to here. He's up in, I can't mention, but anyways, he said, I'm actually on medication. He said, I don't know what the heck is going on. And I said, well, you just moved right precisely on a Moon-Pluto line. Now, I know Pluto's been deemed as not a planet anymore, but in location astrology, the combination of those two clearly manifests. And he read the description that I gave him, and then I showed him exactly. He said, oh my God, that's right where my house is, and I'm like 2 miles away from my office. I said, here's the thing. You got a family, you got a practice, you just rooted yourself in. But here's what I suggested. I said, you at least now know what it is. And there's positive attributes to that as well. And see, again, it's like the airline pilot. Okay, fine. So we've got heavy winds coming out of the west. Well, we could use that to lift easier. It's a better takeoff. Or you become aware, you adjust, you adapt. And he did, and it really helped him a lot because he couldn't just uproot his whole life again. But it really changed his perception of why he was experiencing what he did. And that's, again, when I can hang up the phone and help someone like that, then I feel I've contributed to that person's life in a way that helps them.
And they realize it too, Jeff. When they, it's kind of like it's the answer you were. I don't want to say it's the answer that you were searching for, the answer that you were hoping for. It's the answer that you knew was really going to be that way. You needed that reassurance.
Yeah, sometimes. Today, computers. You know what I've been doing is for people with PCs, I actually have them download a free program. They can screen record the entire session while I record the phone line. And then I send them MP3s. The Mac users, it's even better because the Macs are elegant at recording screenshots or the whole thing. What I do is I log people online with a screen sharing program. It's actually better than nobody comes to my office hardly anymore. I get people all over the world. They log right in, and they can see the maps. And when they screen record it, and I send them the audio, they sync it, and you got a movie of your session. And astrology uses a lot of different vernacular and terms, but once you get it, once you see what it's indicating, and you get familiar with it, it's like, okay, boom, the light comes on, and you go, okay, I can use that. I've had a lot of people who said, I watched it again a couple of times. Now I get it. Now I get, you're saying this is the date Saturn will hit my ascendant, and my whole life is moving in new directions. There's chapters in all of our lives that it's like surfing. If you're out there waiting for the big one, and it's a calm day, you're probably going to get some gray hair waiting for that wave.
Right.
But if that wave's out there, and you're on that surfboard, I would recommend learning how to surf, or get the heck off the wave. It's really wonderful to see those phasings and timings, and it puts you in step with the energy that's on you. It's like phase relationships, that you get in phase with what's happening, and you utilize the energy more effectively.
Exactly. Looking at some of your talking points that you sent, we didn't even go to any of them, but I did have a couple questions for you just to get your thoughts on it. We did cover some of them, of course, with businesses and personal astrology, but serious issues coming up in the next several years, and this year. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. That is a whole subject we haven't broached yet. Well, you're good at letting people talk. I like you. You have a really
compared to that other guy that asks a million questions.
Well, no, you let people open up, and I appreciate that. And that's kind of dangerous with me because I really will open up. But anyhow, the question you're asking on our list here was what's happening in the world right now with the economics. Well, this is a fascinating topic. George Washington, many of the secret societies have used what I call the ancient Egyptian astrology. If anyone wants to do a little research, Washington, D.C. is an Egyptian temple, and it really is. It was designed by a French architect. The esoteric symbolism in there is pretty astounding. And, George might have been right. Forget the politicians, you have owners. Well, anyways, the long story short is there's astrology that the ancients used, and they still use it, trust me, which is a lot different than the modern astrology. There's something called the Great Conjunctions, and it shows when society changes. Well, the last great conjunction we had was in 1702, which ushered in the modern Industrial Revolution. And I think anybody can agree with me that life is a heck of a lot different from the 1700s than it is now. And we have been on a ramped escalation that is pretty mind-blowing. Well, what's interesting is the next one coming is 2020. Everybody was asking me a few years ago, what do you think of the Mayan calendar? I said, not much. I can't come up with a single thing. But 2020, I can. And we are right now in the throes of a huge, what I would call, growing pain cycle. We're in many astrologers, if they're listening, would know that we're in what we call a Uranus-Pluto hard square aspect series, and we've been in it ever since the fall of 2012, and we're going to continue to be into it all the way into next year. This is why the weather's been off the charts, the sinkholes. Every time, on my website, there's an article that goes back. Every time these two mix up, there's always revolution, dissension, complete contraction and expansion in society. It goes crazy. And we see all the issues right now, both politically, look at the weather, but most importantly, the one that's really on the radar screen is the world is changing, and the economics. The BRIC nations right now, which many people may be familiar, it's basically, Brazil, India, China, and Russia, and many other nations on top of that, South Africa. And the BRICS nations, if anybody Googles it, most people probably know about it, are polarizing right now, particularly Russia and China, against the U.S. petrodollar. And this is what the astrology is showing. The world as we know it is going to be changing between now and 2020. Not that I'm saying 2020 is going to be the end of the world. No, I think we're in this major transitional phase where the world is changing. Now, some people, like Alex Jones, are going to say it's the New World Order, and he might not be wrong. Personally, there's some evidence there that there are some forces going on here that aren't exactly in the best interest of humanity's consciousness. And we see the manipulation and the on and on. If you look at the derivatives markets right now, and I'm not a financial expert, but I have a lot of clients who I deal with who are. I've actually got clients who, I can't mention names, but they actually do have meetings with Yellen and used to with Bernanke. And it's interesting to hear these different viewpoints. Many of them are very alarmed because they know, Deutsche Bank's right now, a lot of people call it the silo of derivatives. And, people say, well, geez, could we get World War III? Well, we're actually in war right now with Russia, but financially, not militarily yet. And I hope it doesn't happen. I pray, and I hope everyone else does too, because I think thoughts do matter, that nothing like that has to happen. I think there's a hands on the bat right now in the world financial systems, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this one plays out with the petrodollar, the yuan swap, and other things that are on the table from what I'm hearing. And the astrology using the ancient system says we're going to see a new era encroaching by 2020. And I think, personally, what they predicted last century, that we'd be flying around like the Jetsons by 1985, remember that? Many people had postulated, in the 40s and 50s that we'd have flying cars by the 1990s. I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see the roaring 2020s start. And that's not very far away. We're 5.5, 6 years away from this. And the question is with the astrology right now, are we going to get there where we can use diplomacy and, hopefully consciousness to get there, or are we going to have more of what humanity has done in the past, and that's blowing each other into the next era? I hope it doesn't happen, and it doesn't have to. And I'm not saying it will. Indicators are, the astrology looks like it's a dicey time. It really does. And I think we're going to see maybe a little bit of both. And hopefully we get there in a way that, everybody can live with a little more consciousness and acceptance. But I can tell you the astrology is showing right now exactly what the financial markets are showing. It is crazy. Many financial experts are predicting the crash of the dollar. The U.S. is going to fall in. From my little corner of the world, I don't see that. I think they're going to maintain this system. And for us in America, I hope they do, because life will change as we know it if it doesn't. And there's been a lot of dire predictions that haven't come true. I'm sure you've heard of these.
Sure.
The Fed, everyone knows, runs our money. They print our money. But I don't think the Fed's the top of the capstone. I think it goes much deeper, and this is tied in quite deeply through London and Europe, and of course we hear NATO, but I think it's a lot more than that. And China's got the padded handcuffs on. I mean, all you got to do is sit at a railroad crossing and watch how many China containers you see going by with Hung Chun Chin on them. And I mean, it never stops. Go to L.A. Harbor or Seattle, you need a stop and go light to stop the ships coming in from the Orient.
That's true.
Southeast Asia, and they aren't just going to throw that in the garbage can either. And that's why I have hope. I have hope that we're going to see. Most of the people predicting the utter doom and gloom, at the end of the sentence, they're showing you gold, silver, or something. And I do think gold and silver is a good buy, and I think it has sustainability. But that's being manipulated too.
Yeah. When we talk about like the New World Order, I mean, there are a lot of people that believe that the government officials are just puppets, and there's this kind of this room, over in what's you talk about the group of
the Bilderberg and all that,
the group of 300 and
right.
and all this
Absolutely.
stuff. Do you believe though that there are? I don't want to say I believe or I don't believe in that, but do you believe that there are very influential groups of people out there that use astrology and some of these other things to potentially make decisions, and over the years have had good success with the results and continue to do it? Do you believe there's, I've heard the Rothschilds used astrologers.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not here to tell you that, I do astrology for all of them, but I can tell you I know that I've been asked significant questions that had far-reaching issues connected to them. And, one of the blessings in my little viewpoint is this world is so compartmentalized, and thank God, literally it is, that I think there's divine forces guiding this far above what everybody realizes. Because we constantly hear, the end is near, right? They pull up the billboards and the world is ending. I always quote, remember Orson Welles, he did the documentary, The Late Great Planet Earth. I remember in the late 70s walking out of the theater going, my God, we're not going to be here after 1985. Nuclear holocaust, atomized cities, but it's all never happened. And I know there's satanic rituals. I mean, I don't want to say too much here. We're on live radio. But I have seen what I've seen. And there is a lot of stuff going on, a lot of playing around with magic and black magic, which is exceedingly dangerous stuff. And you can lose your soul. And yet, thank God, literally, there's the divine. And I really believe that when it's all done and said, humans ain't smart enough to figure it out. We're just smart enough to do what we do, but we're not. I always say the Earth is the soul cauldron, and it's the soul cauldron, and that there's too many souls here. And yeah, China's got all the missiles and stuff, and Russia does too. And believe me, the U.S. really is formidable militarily. I mean, when you look at what the U.S. has, and forget the Black Ops projects, just look at what we have. And we do have the Black Ops projects. I can't mention these, but I have a couple of clients who are into some pretty interesting stuff in the military. And the only thing I can say is the little bit I know, which ain't much, the words come out, wow. I mean, it's pretty amazing what this country has built up. And, a lot of folks say, well, but the dollar's not backed by anything. I say, well, how about the U.S. military? And it is. It's a pretty entrenched, colossal system. And I have more optimism than most that I hear, because I that's my personal belief, and I'm not saying I'm right. I hope I'm right. The indicators I keep getting from questions I receive from certain individuals, as well as my own, the astrology comes up. We're going to get through this, and I think we're going to see a new era. I think the dangers of technology are very challenging. Security and secrecy and privacy and all that are, the more technology we get, the more we're giving ourselves up to that system. But on the other hand, I think there's forces keeping it in play that are going to be, in the end, it's going to work out better than we think.
And that's all we can hope for, live for, and learn. Jeff, I got to wrap it up for the night. I want to thank you so much for being here, and
thank you. Yeah.
Greatest. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your weekend to be with us, and I've learned a lot, and learning more all the time. That's what it's all about.
We never stop learning, and anytime we think we know something, that's the real danger. Is the egotistical. I always say I don't know. I'm just reporting what I do know.
Exactly.
And that's why I love astrology from the standpoint of the ancient methods. You really see what it says and then look at it from that vantage point. It's just an indicator,
Exactly.
which is shapeable by what we do.
Well, I hope you and Camille have a great weekend, have a couple of days off, and let's stay in touch. Love to get you back on again. So much more to cover, so much more to talk about.
Well, many blessings to you, and thanks for having me on.
Okay, Jeff. Have a good night. Thank you again
You bet.
for the
Thank you.
time. Take care.
You bet.